Hi, everyone. So a question that keeps coming up is, you know what ST elevation is, but you don't know exactly how to qualify that you have ST elevation. For example, if you're distinguishing between having STEMI versus having NSTEMI or unstable angina, because you got to know the difference because it determines a whole different course of action. So one important qualification is if you're looking for NSTEMI, trying to diagnose that, you have to have ST elevation in at least two contiguous leads, meaning two leads that are pointing to anatomically contiguous sites. For example, if there is ST elevation in lead 2, 3, and AVF, then they're pointing to the inferior wall. So it could be an inferior wall STEMI. Okay, so this would be AVF over here pointing down. This would be 3 pointing down and to the right, and 2 pointing down and to the left. So also, though, you have to know how much ST elevation is a ST elevation. And so you can't just look at it and say, oh, that looks elevated. First thing, you got to determine the J point. So finding the J point is that's your frame of reference with respect to the TP segment. Okay, meaning if you look at the segment between the end of the T wave here and the beginning of the P wave, which is here, okay, or the next P wave here. So that corresponds to your isoelectric line. And then you're looking for the J point. Let's change the color here to distinguish it. J point. And then you have to measure how far above this isoelectric line, which is defined by the TP segment, how far you are. How many little boxes are you? Each little box corresponds to 0.1 millivolts. Now, in most of the leads, 0.1 millivolt is enough. If you're at least 0.1 millivolt of elevation of the J point, meaning of the ST segment, above the isoelectric line, then you can say you have ST elevation in that lead. But there are two exceptions. The exceptions are V2 and V3. For those, you need a little bit more. For a female, it has to be at least 0.15 millivolts, so 1.5 little boxes. And then if you're a male, depends on if you're over 40 or under 40. So under 40, it has to be 2.5 little boxes because it has to be at least 0.25 millivolts of ST elevation in order to call that ST elevation in one of those leads, meaning V2 or V3. Okay, everything else, 0.1 millivolts is enough. And then if you're 40 or older and you're male, 0.2 millivolts, so 2 little boxes. So 0.2 millivolts for a man over 40, and then 0.25 for a man below 40, 0.15 for a woman. If you have any of those in lead V2 or V3, that counts as ST elevation. Any other lead, 0.1 is enough. So you can say that there's a STEMI if you've got anything that counts as ST elevation for whatever lead you have, and they are contiguous leads for the sake of seeing if there's a STEMI there. Also, if there's sometimes you won't even have ST elevation, but you can say that it's STEMI. For example, if you got bundle branch block, then it's really hard to see if there's ST elevation or to define ST elevation. So that also counts. Now, there are other situations when you'll have ST elevation, but you won't have a STEMI. You may have like all over the place ST elevation, as you might have, for example, in pericarditis, myocarditis. And you might have just one lead with ST elevation. You wouldn't really be able to call it STEMI in that case. There's even cases of benign hyper repolarization, it's called, and that's really, something you have to know about also. But this is the general way to distinguish, to be able to qualify when you actually have ST elevation according to the rules.